Well, good afternoon, and thanks everybody for joining us here on our webinar on diversity in the future of diversity of the technical industry. I'm delighted and may I say thank you very much indeed to the two ladies who are joining me to give me their varying perspectives on the situation. We have Anne Blehein, who is a senior software development manager for BD RCI, so that's BD Medical's research centre in Ireland, who has come up the ranks within the technical things since she came out as an electronic engineer a couple of years ago and went into the wonderful world of tech. We also have Amanda Bevan. Amanda comes from the HR side of things, a HR professional for many years standing in a number of different sectors and industries, including being very much involved in the ramping up and building the team within the BDI RCI as well. So when we were asked to put together a webinar discussing diversity in different areas, how they're going to come together and the different perspectives, these are the two people that I thought of immediately. So if I can just start off by asking Anne, as we said, a couple of years ago when you came out, would you like to describe the environment or culture of the technical world in which you entered as a fresh-faced electronic engineer?
Okay, hi everyone, and before I start, I guess I work for Becton Dixon, but I'm not necessarily representing BD's views here, they're my own. So I did electronic engineering, and actually when I did it, about a third of my class were women, which was the highest ratio they'd had and probably ever had since. But that was the last time I probably was in the company of so many women in tech, so as a percentage. So one of my early jobs was in an electronic manufacturing company, and I would have been the only woman out of 35. And I must say that was a very challenging environment because the culture was different, and culture was very masculine and quite macho, so I didn't feel like I belonged. It was tough. At one point I was expected to sit at a desk. I was plastered in photos of topless women. And I did decline the offer and stuck at my desk in the corridor, which was better than sitting at that desk. It's just a very different culture. And when I moved from there to a more software company, I found it like super friendly, much nicer, much more relaxed. So, but that again was all men, so I think part of it was industry culture, and I think that's maybe some of the things that can be hard depending on where you joined. It's not necessarily to do with the amount of males or female, even though that does affect the culture in a place. But I did learn a lot from it, and I learned a lot from the way maybe women might go about doing things versus the way men would, and how you kind of have to stand your corner. I remember running a meeting once, and I was really pleased to get the opportunity to run this meeting. And another guy just completely took over, and I was like, what have I done? What happened? But I realized I gave him the opportunity, so you learn how to manage things, and you learn a lot from it. But yeah, I think things have changed a lot since then.
So just to add into that, what you're saying is it was all men, but was there any diversity? Were they all Irish men from Galway or from wherever, or was there any kind of diversity of backgrounds or approaches?
No, so this is like, I'll have to give away my age, but like there was no diversity in Ireland at the time, full on, no diversity. So of cultures, it was very much Irish. So I guess my initial thing on diversity was very much male versus female because I did engineering. You kind of get used to being predominantly men. So now the IT industry has got very different because you've got a huge number of Ireland has changed massively, and our industry and the work environment has changed as a result of that. We're much, much more diverse. Ireland's a very different country than the one I graduated into.
That's true in a lot of respects for all of that. But I'm interested in what you're saying there, because you said you went from tech into software and you found that to be different. And we have Amanda, who's worked in healthcare and banking and tech. How would you have described the culture when you started versus, and indeed between the sectors? Did you notice a difference, or what difference did you notice?
Yeah, absolutely, Noelle. I think, I suppose my background, as mentioned, is in healthcare. So I was used to working in a very diverse environment. Both, I suppose we recruited across the globe, really, in terms of trying to get healthcare into Ireland. But very much there was a very, I suppose, a big divide when I joined BD. I noticed there was a huge difference, obviously between the industries, but obviously, in terms of diversity and building those teams. Because I suppose in the medical industry, it was kind of, we rolled out HR initiatives and programs very much probably with that in mind, where in the tech industry we really needed to include that diversity and build those teams, build the culture of the organization as well into accepting the differences between people. And that's really, I suppose, what diversity is about, is the differences, of the individual. And HR needs to be agile to recognize that, that's, we need to concentrate on that and implement that into our initiatives.
Okay, absolutely. I'm interested that you're saying that in the technical side of things, there was a focus put on getting diversity in, whereas there wasn't in other sectors. Was that, do you think, BD or?
Well, I would say that's probably unfair to say, but I think there was much more of a focus on it. And again, I suppose, as Anne is saying, I suppose this is evolving over the years as well, where there's more of a drive and this sort of shift, which I think is fantastic, into identifying people as an individual and recognizing the fact that one size doesn't fit all, and we need to be really more creative in our thinking when we're introducing HR initiatives into the organization. We as HR professionals need to be agile to what the business needs are. So I suppose it'd be unfair to say in the medical industry there wasn't that, but I think there's much more of a shift towards that in the tech industry.
Well, it's an interesting thing to see, because again, we would obviously have seen a lot more of diversity, but we wondered if it was being very much driven by an understanding of the value that diversity can bring, or was it just, we can't get the skills at home, so we'll take them wherever we can. So
and I think there's an element of each and every one of those things that you just mentioned, for sure. It's but within the healthcare industry as well, we absolutely were. It was a global initiative where we were bringing people from many corners of the world into the industry. But it is more and more of a focus, and I think as HR becomes more and more agile to what the business needs, then that focus is definitely more heightened, I suppose, within the tech industry.
Okay, that's interesting. It was something I was going to bring in later on in this piece, but you actually brought it up there. I was thinking about going forward. It was something that came up in the research I was doing about this webinar, was the Australian attitude and approach to this. And in a nutshell, the Australian government pretty much mandates that any publicly listed company must have targets for gender diversity and must report on them and must explain why they're not hitting them. So obviously very top down and very government mandated, but we were chatting to people who've done recruitment in that environment, and they'd said that they had to send through diverse submissions, but the government and the attitude and the culture as a whole is set up to then bring these people in, even if they don't have 100% of the skill set. So I suppose what I'm thinking about that from what you were saying, that it's very much a top-down approach in tech, is how would you feel about an environment, I suppose, if that's the right answer, whereby you are mandated that you must interview, you must get candidates of different, you must interview, you must explain why you don't have them. Do you think that could work in Ireland, and how?
I think it's already a challenging environment, and Anne will, I'm sure, attest to this, in the hiring of these very highly skilled individuals. So I think, if we have to wait or to, ensure that we have X amount of numbers, in the recruitment for each and every role, then I think it becomes even more challenging then to set up these highly diverse teams. But what I do think we need is the initiatives that I mentioned earlier. Once we, establish these teams, that we're rolling out these initiatives once they're settled and hired and working and operating within the organization. I don't get me wrong, I think it's an excellent initiative in Australia. I just think it might make our lives a little bit more challenging if we were to, to have to implement that scale. But it is vitally important that we do the initiatives like the Women in STEM, attracting, that talent into the organization, and ensuring that we are, that the employer branding demonstrates that we are a diverse and inclusive organization.
Okay, Anne, I'm curious, as somebody who's hiring tech people and who is a woman in tech, would you like a situation where if you send me 5 CVs, there must be at least one woman in them, or I won't accept any?
Well, the chances of that happening are pretty slim, and that's the problem. I just don't see the CVs. So there's a fundamental problem with women not doing software development, computer science, engineering. The numbers are just not high enough. And it's not that it's not open to them or they're not doing the right subjects. Is is they are not applying to do it. So the problem then is it that they don't, it's not something that attracts them, or they don't feel that they would be happy in that industry. So I think part of it is we need to publicize what it's like there. I've gone into secondary schools and talked about it, but I will focus on writing software. It's really only half your job. The other half is communications. And I try and paint a picture of the teamwork, communications, so that female students can identify and see where their skill set, where they could contribute, and the type of person that belongs there. So part of it, I think, is an image that people don't really understand what it's like to work in it, because I actually think it's a very female-friendly environment. Okay, my initial engineering experience wasn't so female-friendly, and it was probably, they were pretty uncomfortable with me anyway. They didn't know how to talk to me. But I think generally the software industry is very female-friendly and very work-life balance friendly in general, has that potential. And you can see that with the whole working from home thing now. It's almost invisible in lots of ways. It's seamless. It's very easy. It's very easy to manage your life and your life commitments with software, because the flexibility around when you can do it, when you can do the work. It's, you're not tied to being in a place or with specific set of equipment, for example, to do it. But to go back to the bigger point around recruiting, I think the challenges with diversity apply. There's a number of different approaches. One of them is like a quota system, a lot of programs and initiatives to drive that hiring. But I think there's a more fundamental, almost like societal shift, where we have to accept diversity, be more accepting, where people feel open, you create that culture, then it's the norm. And I think society's changed quite a bit. So I tend to talk about the importance of diversity of thought. Like it's in a way, I don't care, and why should I ever care what somebody looks like, sounds like, as long as they're polite, where they come from, because they're just going to bring a different point of view. And you want, when you build a team, to bring people with diversity. You want different patterns of thought. And they may both be white males who have very different thought patterns. So maybe in that original engineering job, I found I struggled to talk to people at breaks because I didn't follow Gaelic football. I didn't have I didn't do car mechanics and stuff. But there's lots of men who that would apply to too, and they wouldn't have felt like they belonged either. So it's a bigger thing. We can tackle it in pieces, but also as a society, we need to embrace diversity. And I think as we start to do that, things will change. So we can tackle the challenge in multiple ways. I also do think there's always going to be jobs that men prefer to women or women prefer to men. You're not going to have 50-50 in every job. So you do always have that tendency anyway, but it is a bit distorted in tech for sure, and I don't think it needs to be. So I think tech needs to evolve to a culture that's much more accepting of women. And I would say most of my experience has been positive, but you do hear some stories, and even the stuff you see or read on the internet about women, senior tech women who are effectively trolled, like that's horrendous. So that fundamental culture does need to be sorted out. But we can start in it as a company. You do it with your programs, how you approach people, and how programs you run at work, how you run teams, and all these things help you to manage a team better anyway. They're all good skills to develop, and I think part of the fallout of that is that you embrace diversity as part of it.
I think that was an incredible rundown, and I personally would agree. You're completely right. It has to be a societal shift. One of the things that impressed me on the Australian government's, here's how to go about it, was the line of why would you do it? And one was the fact that it does increase business performance, but I really like their second one. It's the right thing to do. You're right. Not every job will have 50-50, but wouldn't it be great if every job had the potential that if people wanted to, it could? But anyway, that's a different tangent we could go down very quickly. So to come back to it and to bring it back to more sort of personal or your own background reactions, is there any examples that you could give? Obviously not in any way particular or identifiable, and maybe this is a bit of a tough question, but can you go back to, in your experience, well, when we didn't have diversity or a lack of diversity and how it impinged on it versus something that somebody had a viewpoint? It may be a very vague question, so apologies for putting you on the spot in advance. Amanda, do you want to have a go with that one, seeing as we're asking?
Thanks, Noelle. Yeah, I have lots of examples, obviously not kind of, prime examples that I can share here, but I think, there has been that cultural shift. And I think within the organization itself, it's up to us as leaders, the leadership, to implement a culture where it's a very inclusive culture, and that we recognize, as I mentioned earlier, the uniqueness of the individual. And particularly in software, I think we hire people for their creativity, their innovation, and then, do we expect them to fit into a particular process or a way of doing things around here? So we as an organization need to recognize these individuals, that they are not going to all fit into, a one size fits all, as I mentioned earlier, and that we need to really recognize and reward people for this creativity and innovation. So it's working, I suppose, with them, and very much the onus is on the leadership within the organizations, not just the top, but the team leads, that we really foster that inclusive environment. And I think from there on, if we implement that culture into our organizations, then we'll go a long way to valuing the person and the uniqueness, and particularly I think in the tech industry, as I mentioned. So yes, there's plenty of examples, Noelle. But I do recognize that, and I think within BD in particular, a lot of work has been done around, that inclusivity, the cultural awareness, fantastic cultural days, aware of the fact that people are different, and the differences can really make or break a team. So, let's recognize the differences and continue to try and work together. And, the recognition that the perceptions of the different ways people think and even write, because even in emails and so, we need to really, really roll out those initiatives to say, people are different. They have a different way of thinking. They have a different way of writing. They have a different way of, relationship building, and recognizing those. And if our leaders can recognize that and lead forward with these initiatives, then I think, we'll go a long way towards building a very diverse and inclusive culture into our organization.
Absolutely, I'm going.
That answers your question, Noelle, but it's.
No, but I mean, as I realized as I was asking it, that I'm probably putting you both on the spot to give an example without it being identifiable or whatever. But just listening.
Yeah, it's hard, but I like what it's about valuing people and their input. And if people feel respected, then they can contribute to a team, and it carries over to managing remotely in COVID situation, because. So to me, building strong teams is really important, and this is a core part of it, that everybody feels valued on the team, and diversity is a big part of that, and embracing it. Otherwise, you end up with groupthink, and there's been plenty of examples in history, of the dangers of groupthink. But also now, when people are more remote, you have to build up those relationships, because we were all together on site, and you get some of the carryover for that. But this goes on longer, and more people, it's a longer time remote and less time together, then you really have to focus on people being valued and their contribution and how you manage all that. So I think it goes back to my theme about saying, all these things you want to do for diversity are good management practice for everybody, because everybody's different anyway, and they have a different perception of how things are, what works for them. So it's to be open to that, and to teach everybody to be open as to how you interpret things. If you come from a different culture, different background, then how you perceive things is going to be, you may perceive things differently than somebody realizes you're going to. And that's the challenge all the time. But everything you ever read, say, about influencing people says you need to understand the other person's mindset. So these are all good general practices. They all kind of tie back in again, that if you do all the stuff well, you will have a diverse workforce where everybody feels valued.
That was absolutely fascinating. And I get, sorry, you're smiling at me. I'm going, but it is, because I got very engrossed in this when I started doing the prep on it. I was going, yeah, diversity is important, but I was very lip service to it. And it's fascinating to see how you're doing that there. And of course, you sparked another 3 questions or so, at least, out of that. But I was wondering, as you say, the time of COVID, everybody is at home. How have you, and people are contacting you at all times. Have either of you discovered that?
Sorry.
Not to worry. That more diverse teams have actually been more resilient and can support each other. Or have you found that more homogenous teams have been better, or is that just a ridiculous question to ask anyway, because it would depend on each team?
I missed the question, sorry.
I know. I realised that you were
asking about diverse teams, whether they support each other more or less, is it?
What have we seen over the last 3 months? Because God knows everybody has found it challenging in varying ways. So have diverse teams worked better or less, or have you noticed?
I think where you have a strong, to see if I can think of a couple of examples where I consider my strong teams that I know they work very well as a team together, very high functioning, people feel supported, they feel safe, so that they all contribute, there's good healthy debate over things. They're all quite diverse teams. So I don't know if that's an influencing factor or not, but they are quite diverse teams. But they've built that up, and there's a lot of trust in the team. So that really answers your questions, because I can't.
Like that doesn't happen. That obviously doesn't happen overnight, and I think it takes a very strong leader as well to recognise, and to listen to people, and take the feedback on board, and maybe not all of it you want to make the changes, but so that's what it's about. As Anne said, that people feel that they're being listened to and that they're being valued, and where do they fit into that bigger picture within the organization itself. So definitely in times of like these, when in COVID, people need to feel connected as well to the organization, and it's about ensuring that connectivity continues to happen and that they feel connected as a team. So it's very much, we need to come up with more very innovative ways to ensure that these teams stay connected, however that might be. And I'm sure Anna's novel approach has been taken to this within the organization, but we really do need to ensure that happens, because people need to feel that they are, as I said, connected. So
can I post just a second for how my company did it?
We work for Noelle.
Out in the post with our own names on them, our own chilly insulated cups and our bottles rather, and it was out of the blue, and none of us knew it was coming. And I know for me, I really did feel, I was very grateful for it. I was like, hey, we're all still together. So, but how do you do that? That's one thing when you say you've got a diverse team, they've learned to get the value from each other, from working closely together, they've seen where it's coming from. How do you go forward? How do you recruit new people? How do you onboard them? How do you build that if they're not going to be in the office one day every 2 weeks or one day every week? What plans have you got in place, Anne?
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Noelle.
I know you have.
Yeah, no, I have people come on board, and they come in, they get their equipment, somebody meets them, so they've met somebody in person, and then they go home again. So some of the methods, like, is to try, decide somebody a buddy. So there's obviously going to be their virtual buddy, but it's their go-to person the whole time. But every team does it differently. Like there was one team actually where the team in San Jose wanted to have like a coffee hour or a cocktail hour or something like that, and the team in Ireland were like, no, it's not an idea of fun to go on a call with 30 people and it feels artificial. But they were comfortable to say that, So and teams need to figure out what works for them. So some teams will do the social stuff, eat or lunch together, but other teams, that's just not their cup of tea at all. So then they'll do different things. So it is a challenge because it's hard. It's hard to have this fun remotely, because we would normally have invested quite a lot in team activities. So people kind of know each other and feel comfortable with each other. And that's where you want to get that new person to where they know and feel comfortable. Like right now, people are starting to come back into the office. We've allocated, trying to get teams to come in as a team. And even if they just come in and had socially distant lunch, then I think that would be good. And I think now's a good time because we've come out of lockdown, the numbers are low. I guess I'm afraid they're going to get high again. So now is good. I think we kind of need to seize the opportunity so people get to meet each other in a way that they feel comfortable, and it's people's choice if they come in. But
I think the other thing that was done very well in BD as well is the collaboration across teams. People are sharing their knowledge and sharing that, the insight into the different teams as well. And I think continuing those types of lunch and learn forums and those types of things as well, where people feel comfortable, maybe more comfortable because they're software engineers in a technical discussions than just in that social piece. So there's a lot of work can be done across that collaboration as well across the teams, I think.
But that is actually another interesting point, because what that brings me to, Amanda, was not only did you try and have diverse teams within software, you also had diverse teams of scientists and bioscientists and engineers and all the other functions. All of them would have had their own little challenges there. So it's actually, if you can talk a little more about how you're like, well, we have to bring this software team and bash it together off these product teams and get them to talk to each other. And what you found was particularly effective, was it the lunch, or were there other things that you did do?
It's really the people understanding where they are in the product life cycle. So there might be scientists and engineers and very different skill sets working in one particular project, but not realizing, and I think that's what makes, that's what can make it unique, is realizing where they fit into the product life cycle itself. And so I suppose the discussions between and the collaboration across those different skill sets as well is hugely important. So they see where they fit into the bigger picture, and also the end product, what is it doing, where is the end life cycle and where they fit into that. So I think that's sort of, again, is that sense of belonging, the sharing, the knowledge. That's really key, I think, Noelle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've noticed in here in the background that questions are starting to come up. And one of the questions there, and I think it fits into what you were saying, Anne, in terms of getting in people with more diverse backgrounds. Would you consider hiring somebody with less experience for the role in order to keep the environment of the team or the department more diverse?
So I don't have diversity targets because I think I have a very diverse workforce. But what I look, though, is probably what skills they will add. So somebody may have less technical skills, but I may see they've really strong, maybe team building skills, huge strong interest in the industry. So I know they will invest the time to learn what their gaps are. So you look at the whole person, because nobody just sits and writes code in isolation. Or, they're part of a team. If this is like an imaginative problem solver, are quite driven, they've got a strong interest in maybe agile software development process, or they particularly like the science. I know somebody interviewed for a role and she turns out subscribed to Science magazine. So she was super interested in the domain, because like our domain is the medical devices. So there's science, but there's also the mechanics of the diagnostic equipment, but there's a whole science behind it. So we were looking for a balanced team, and people bring different skills. So you will evaluate the whole person as much as you can figure what their addition to the team would be, or also their addition. I'm not just hiring I might have a job rec for a particular project, but I'm really looking at what's the future in our CI, what's this person's future in the company, what would be their future, and would they be a good addition? So they may be short-term skills, but have some other really good skills. So you're looking for the long-term hire, not just the short-term gain.
It's interesting to hear that, because it's actually quite rare that I would have, well, you know me, I will tend to sit down with my clients and go, but who's the person? But job specs very rarely have any kind of, I want somebody with good soft skills to communicate. They're all very, very technical. So I wonder if that's something that'll change down the line. Thomas was wondering if you had any suggestions for graduates who want to get into the industry, other than labeling the CV, I am a diverse hire, maybe?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to figure the assumptions as the person, because if you have a computer science degree of some sort of engineering, then that's probably your pathway in. I'm not sure. So I did recently hire a grad to start in the autumn who is doing, it's a technical degree, but it's a very small software component, realized they really liked it. So they've actually done some online software courses, and they did a very good technical interview. So there's an awful lot of training available online, and you can do that. We do just, for minimum entries, you have to have a degree, but I'm not saying your degree has to be in computer science. If you have a really strong interest in it, if you come from another technical background, you're going to bring those skills with you. And I have found over the years that people who ended up in software, who took the scenic route, often because they discover they love it, by an indirect route, and they make really good software developers, and they really enjoy the work. So
So go out and be looking for more information and upskilling yourselves, and the more interest and initiative you show, the more likely you're going to get that back from the client.
And that you know this is what you want to do.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And I have a great one here
Amanda.
from Sinead. It's the lack of women in tech. Do you think Ireland, I'm going to say / the government, because that was going to be one of my other questions, could be doing more persuading or promoting the tech industry to girls at an early age, so that you're not hitting college and going, oh, I don't want to do honours maths for my leaving cert, as I was told I shouldn't do many years ago, because that'll take too much time to study. Just so everyone knows. Sorry, couldn't resist. But,
You didn't let that one go yet.
what could they be doing?
I definitely, and I think it should start earlier, like certainly secondary schools. I wouldn't say primary. Primary should just be a balanced education. Everybody should get a good balanced science, introduction to science in primary school as well. It's secondary school, and it's from the get-go in secondary school, and I think there should be more programs in school around technology, understanding what it is, and actually making it more accessible, so it doesn't seem like a barrier. You don't understand what it is. That's what I think, and I definitely think they could be doing a lot in secondary schools. There's huge opportunity there.
Just throwing an idea that popped up in my head at that stage. Would you think that women only or female only coder dojos, in the same way you get women only gyms because people don't want to go to a mixed gym? Do you think that might help and take away a little bit of the, oh God, all the boys are talking tech, I don't get it, I'm going to leave? Or not?
Don't know.
I think, I suppose, from having 2 children who've just been through that, I think the diversity between the male-female thing that we might have had in our, going through school is very different now, Noelle. I think that element is gone. But I think it's just about, maybe not gone completely, but definitely is hugely improved. But I think what we really need to do is to demonstrate, possibilities within tech. I mean, they're so vast that, it's not, it's not very isolated in terms of tech itself. It can open your world so many things. So that's what we need to show in schools, I think, the possibilities within tech and what it can bring. And I think, we definitely need to improve on that as employers, as government, as, really that's important that we get out that message. And that we keep up the initiatives, like the Women in STEM, all those initiatives that are being driven by lots of, really, really good employers. And I think that there is a lot of work being done on that, but there's more to do for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, as I say, the Australian government is going, it leads to better returns, and McKinsey are saying 15% above average returns, the more diverse you are.
Yeah.
And yet we're still in a situation where people, don't know about that. So, looking at experts who've been through a very grueling, if I may say, project to go from 0 up to there and to bring all these in and to bring all of that there, are there any life pro tips you would have come up with that you'd like to share on why, where, how, when, all of the above? Okay, let me be slightly more. That was
open-ended questions.
I know.
I'm not sure you're asking me. I'm sorry.
Don't ask those questions, so I've been trying. But yeah, was there anything that stood out for you? That really worked. That didn't work, or is it just build it in?
Well, I think it's about, again, Noelle, it's really about building the leadership in the organization, identifying, your vision, mission, your culture, what it is you want the organization to look like. And then you're hiring, of course, according to skill sets, but you're also hiring the individual according to the fit of the organization. And I think, that's vital. And when you have good leaders, they know what they're looking for that specific team, and you have to really get that involvement. So it's really involving the people who are at the front line of that project in the hiring and getting that right. I think, that would be vital. For sure, and it's that autonomy, giving those leaders the autonomy to go and hire according to, within reason, of course. I mean, we have to have the input, of course, from all their stakeholders as well. But I think that's really important that we get very close to it when we're hiring.
Okay, that's brilliant. And would you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I really think it's about having an open and accepting culture. So it's the culture in an organization that will drive behavior. And that is usually it's set from the top. So
I saw a lovely line which just feeds in with what you're saying there. You have to be very intolerant of intolerance to have a tolerant, diverse company.
right.
Tolerant of
Intolerance, yeah.
Anything, but it is interesting seeing that because, as I say, over the years, when you're on the recruitment side of things, and I've been in recruitment for a while, we used to get specs in going only Irish people. We don't get those anymore, thankfully, and people are a little bit more. But sometimes you still have a lot of people who are very, no, I want what I'm familiar with. I think there's a kind of a tension between building a good storm who all get on very well together and perform well, and still being open to the diversity and the way people are thinking differently and handle things differently of that nature. So in that circumstance, how do you drive high performance culture and balance both of those slightly contradicting requirements?
So I think part of it, I think I was talking earlier about if people feel valued and safe, then they will blossom. So if people have appropriate level of autonomy and where there's a lot of respect and everybody's treated very much with respect and is respected, then people can give of their best. And are not people. It's very important people are not afraid to question. That questions are not seen as a threatening thing. Questions are good, and where people care what they're doing. So if people are motivated if they have an ownership for their work, and if what they're doing makes sense, and they understand the bigger picture and the context, then people will go above and beyond to deliver, and that's rewarding. So then everybody's happy. The company benefits because you put in your very best, and as an individual, you feel rewarded. Your work feels worthwhile. It's you feel fulfilled. You feel like you've got purpose in your life, and that's an important need for people to have purpose in their life. So it's very important to create that culture, and that has to be it's a very positive culture where people are valued. I think all high performance will stem from that, and then you can everything else will fall out. If you don't have those things in place, it's not going to happen.
I'm just going to ask one very simple question then. How do you make people feel valued? Because I was listening to like, you just do this and this, and I was going, that sounds really hard.
It's that old adage, I suppose, Noelle, don't ask anybody to do anything you're not prepared to do yourself. So I think it's that lead by example. Bring in the culture needs to come from the top down, needs to cascade down. You need to know, the direction we're going. We need to know the values. You need to make sure that the individual is listened to, that they have an input in that, because then they have buy-in. And it's leading that that coaching culture where you know the pulse of your people, you know what's going on. You can, I suppose, identify any issues, I suppose not quite before they arise, but you can see them coming, and you can identify that. And I think that's it, is just really being in touch with the people, and as Anne said, making them feel valued, so that they really know, what are they bringing to the organization, and I think that's key.
Okay, in listening to you both, it seems to be, if I could come up with a takeaway from this, it's that diversity is not something to pay lip service to. It is a genuine value that will drive business performance and success in your company. It won't just happen, but it's well worth putting the time and the effort in. And it boils down to treating everybody like a person and respecting what they're doing for you. Well, we seem to solve that problem now, ladies.
Time for lunch.
Yeah, we're lunch on that. But if anybody else who's online has any other speakers they'd like to, or any other questions they'd like to ask us, please put it in at this stage. And make sure we get through people before we go there. I am a little bit curious I know we spoke about COVID and managing your existing teams, but I read something there today. It took 3.5 months for there to be 1 million cases worldwide. It took 5 days for the last 1 million cases. So this isn't going to happen nothing's going to disappear very soon. How are you going to recruit and manage and build diverse teams when the geographical dispersion or movement is so much more limited? Do you think organizations will have to be okay with hiring completely remote workers that they never meet? Or how do you see it possibly going?
There is actually a challenge with that, with paying people who were not, like, for us, for sure, I know, to pay them, to have a, PPS number and an Irish bank account. So, and I think I'm not sure about the logistics of doing that. Even though I know people who, I've seen CVs of people who seem to work remotely for companies in the UK. So, I'm not sure. We would definitely have to look into the logistics of managing that. And then you also, if you're responsible if you ask people to work from home, you have a responsibility around their work environment. And that's I think it's another challenge, is another thing to take into consideration. So it's not straightforward. We are just at the beginning of this.
No, we absolutely are, and we're as we've been saying all along, the world has changed. We're just trying to figure out how we adapt to it. But I just thought of, I wonder how that might work down the line potentially. Yeah. I think a lot of organisations are going to have to be a lot more people working from home directly. But the idea of I'm thinking about the gentleman in the US who was the best software developer ever, and he had outsourced all his own work to China for about 3 years. So maybe it can work. Ladies, thank you very much indeed for your time and your effort and your preparation and everything that you have done. And thank you very much indeed for coming in and for spending that to share it. It's been I found it very interesting, the whole prep for it and everything else in the discussion, and your insights has been really, really useful to me. I hope to everybody else on the call as well. And we have a note there going, thank you for the brilliant webinar, so interesting. And we didn't pay them. Didn't pay them yet.
Oh, okay. You're not going to get another bottle.
No.
You did, David. Okay.
Look, thanks very much indeed. As we say, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to fire them on. We'll see if we can get answers or thoughts for you later. But in the meantime, thanks a million, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.